Today I'm going to build this A-frame shell and I'm not going to finish off the inside in this video. I'm going to start with the platform and I'm going to use 2x10s for the floor joists. The floor platform is going to be 16 feet wide and 24 feet long. For the floor, I'll be using some 8-foot 2x and some 16-foot 2x. These first three pieces are 16 feet long. Then I'm going to need another 8-foot piece to make it a total of 24 feet long. And I want to stagger the joints, so I'm going to start with an 8-foot piece on the other side. Then I'm going to lay out the joists at 16 inches on center. Now I'm just going to make everything look like wood so it looks more realistic. You could build this upside down and then flip it over, but that would be really difficult. So I'm going to start out by putting 2x2s at the bottom of each floor joist. Now I'm going to put a piece of 1/4 inch plywood on top of those 2x2s. Make sure to caulk all the seams or spray foam to keep all the critters out. Now I'm going to add some insulation in the floor, and you can use fiberglass or sheep's wool or rock wool or whatever you want to use. Now I'm going to put a moisture barrier over the top to keep the warm air and moisture from going down into the floor and causing mold. Now I'm going to put some 4x8 sheets of plywood on the floor. And this will take exactly 12 sheets. You're going to want to build your foundation first, but it's just easier to draw it after I build the platform. If you look on the internet for a span chart, you can see that I am using 2x10s and I am spacing them 16 inches on center. So that means I can span 13 feet 9 inches. If I put the beams 2 feet in from the sides, I'll only be spanning 12 feet. So I really only need 2 beams, but I'm going to put in 3 just because. My beams are going to be made out of 3 2x10s, and they are going to be sitting on concrete blocks or poured concrete footings. Since I'm using 8-foot pieces of lumber, I'm going to put one block under each end of the 2 by. You can always tell an amateur builder because they don't use cantilevers. Cantilevers are important for protecting the structure underneath, and you can use less material. Now we can start on the base plate, and I'm using 2 by 10s here because I'm going to be using 2 by 8 rafters. And I'm going to make this 16 feet long so I can figure out the angle I want. If I make the roof a 12-12 pitch, that will be a 45-degree angle, but that would give me less than 4 feet of headroom in the center of the room. So I'm going to try a 30-degree angle and see how much headroom that gives me. So I figure if I'm under 6 feet tall, that will give me 8 feet in the middle where I don't have to duck. Now I'm going to cut the top of the rafters vertically and leave space for the ridge board. I don't need a ridge beam here because the rafters is sitting on the platform. If the bottom of the rafters is cut at 30 degrees, then the top of the rafters is going to be cut at 60 degrees. Now I'm just going to copy the rafters every 16 inches on center. And continue the ridge board to the end. Because the rafters are more than 10 feet long, I will need blocking, and I'm going to put it right in the middle. I'm going to offset the blocking every other rafter space because it's going to be easier to nail it in that way. Now I'm just going to copy all the blocking to the other side. They didn't quite line up perfectly with the rafter, so I'm just going to move them all over a little bit. That's good enough. You get the idea. Now I'm going to put OSB over top of the rafters. I'm only using OSB because it's cheaper than plywood, but you can use plywood if you want. Now I'm just going to copy all those sheets to the other sides. Now I'm going to start on my end walls. I'm going to make the end walls with 2 by 6s. I'm going to have a 36-inch door, so I'm going to make a 38-inch rough opening, and I want it in the very center of the wall. First, I'll put in the jack studs. Just make sure you have the correct rough opening dimensions for your door because they're all different. Then I'm going to put in the king studs right next to the jack studs. And the king studs will go up to 8 feet. I'm putting a header over the door out of habit because I forgot that I really don't need a header on this wall because it's not a bearing wall. The weight of the roof is not on this particular wall. So I don't need a header here. I could have just used a 2x6. Now I'm just going to finish putting studs in this wall at 16 inches on center. You don't need a top plate for this wall along the rafters, but it might make it easier to build the wall if you're not building it in place. Now I'm just going to copy all these studs to the other side of the door. And I will put some studs in above the door. Now I'm just going to copy this wall to the other side, and I'm going to put in a 5-foot rough opening for a patio door. My screen recorder stopped working, so I didn't get that recorded, but you can see the end result here. And now I'm just cutting out the bottom plate between the doorway. Now I'm going to put some sheathing on the end walls. And cut the sheathing to match the slope of the roof. Whoops, one of my panels fell off, so I'm just gonna copy this one over because it should be the same, only opposite. Now I'm going to put some sheathing over the floor joists because they will be exposed to the rain and the snow and the weather, and I don't want them to rot out. Now I'm just going to copy all these pieces over to the other side since it's exactly the same. And now I can cut out the door openings. Now, I want to put a steel roof on my A-frame, but in order to do that, I need to have strapping. That goes up every 2 feet. But if water or moisture gets behind the steel, it's going to sit on the strapping and eventually rot it out. So in that case, I would need to put on vertical strapping first. Then I can put horizontal strapping on top of that. But I realized that OSB is not a great roofing material because it doesn't hold screws very well. So I'm just going to change all of this exterior sheathing to plywood. Now I'm going to put on a standing seam metal roof. And I'll just cut off this leftover little bit at the end. Now I can copy all that to the other side. Then I will put a ridge cap on top of that. I decided I wanted the front and back wall to be cedar shakes, so I'll put those on now. And the side walls under the rafters. Now I can put in the front door and the back patio door. Now I'm going to turn on the shadows so it looks more realistic. And I'm going to raise the whole thing up a few inches so that it's not underground. And there you have it. There is a total of 384 square feet on the floor and 192 square feet where you will not hit your head if you're under 6 feet tall.